It is day 282 of the second Trump administration, and today we now have dozens of states taking the administration to court for refusing to fund food stamps for the next month. Funding for SNAP benefits is set to run out on Saturday, 3 days from now, because of the shutdown. Of course, the Trump administration could use emergency money to keep it going, but they have officially decided not to. Now, 25 separate states are suing the federal government over that decision. Remember, 42 million people rely on SNAP to get food. That is about 1 in every 8 Americans. Today, on a call with his caucus, Speaker Mike Johnson made it clear that he has no plans for a standalone bill that would fund SNAP. That is according to Politico. Johnson encouraged Republicans to stay unified as more Americans are feeling the real pain from the shutdown. The speaker is, though, starting to face some pushback in his own party. Politico also goes on to report that multiple members called out Johnson for keeping the House out of session. Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to publicly call out the speaker for that decision and for doing nothing about the Obamacare subsidies that are also going away. Today, she posted that Johnson refused to give any policy proposals on the conference call today. And if you are counting at home, the House has not been in session since September 19th. That was more than a week before the shutdown even started. But Speaker Johnson wants you to know House Republicans, they have been working on something. What is that something? It's investigating the Biden presidency. Today, they called on the Justice Department to look into Biden's use of the auto pen. Johnson said that pardons signed with the auto pen are, quote, invalid on their face. This afternoon, AG Bondi posted that a DOJ team has already begun a review. With that, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel. Jeff Mason is here, White House correspondent for Reuters. Leanne Caldwell, chief Washington correspondent for Puck. And Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast and former communications director for Jeb Bush. Leanne, let's start with SNAP. We see nothing happening in the House, but both parties have their own standalone bills in the Senate. What are the chances for any funding before Saturday's deadline?
It's not likely, Steph. The reason is because, well, let's start with the Senate. Senate Majority Leader John Thune floated the idea of standalone bills to alleviate some of the pain of this shutdown late last week. But since then, he's now reversed his position. The White House is clear that they don't want any standalone bills, including to fund SNAP, including to fund federal workers. And Speaker Johnson doesn't want that either. He doesn't want to bring the House back just to vote on one bill that does not reopen the entire government. So what Republicans were talking about doing last week, it seems like those plans have fallen completely flat. They think that by not voting on this stuff, it will continue to put more pressure on Democrats to fold, to reopen the government. And so it looks like this stalemate's going to go on for at least a little bit longer, and with no relief in sight for federal workers, for troop pay, unless the administration does something of moving money around, and SNAP benefits, which Democrats insist is actually required by law for the administration to pay SNAP benefits, even if the government is shut down. But the administration is refusing to do so. Steph.
Jeff, anyone you cover at the White House, has anyone said to you publicly, privately, expressed any concern about people going hungry, Americans going hungry?
And that doesn't mean, I don't want to presume to know whether or not it is something that they're concerned about when they haven't said so, but it's not something I've heard, no. I think largely the White House is interested in and focused on the politics of this shutdown, and so far continues to believe that the Democrats are at the disadvantage. But I do think that the focus right now on people losing their funding for food stamps and people going hungry it has the potential to shift that conversation. And I also think it's really important, and I'm glad you're focusing on it tonight, to just note that this affects real people. And the last several weeks have affected real people too. But when it starts affecting nutrition and assistance for low-income people around the country and the food that they can get or not get, that's a very, very real consequence of a very, very solvable problem in Washington.
And that's the thing, Tim. If you want to argue that Obamacare is flawed, that it costs too much money, it's not a great system, you could have that political argument and propose something else. If you want to say we have too many people in this country receiving SNAP benefits, we need to figure something out so people won't be in that position, that's also a conversation to have down the road. But here we are with people potentially going hungry and not being able to afford health care. Lawmakers know this. It's why the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to call out Mike Johnson. Is he losing control? Is he losing power within his caucus? We know he got his job because of Donald Trump, so it's difficult for him to stand against him. But members of Congress have to be feeling the heat at home.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he's losing power or not, or whether they're feeling the heat at home yet. Look, the members of Congress don't really seem to be doing anything. It's a great job if you can get it. For 5 weeks they haven't worked. They're getting paid. They're not having town halls. It's not like we're seeing lots of videos from these Republicans in their districts. I assume a lot of them are getting some Netflix time in. And so, whether that heat changes next week, maybe. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking out is meaningful, right? And I think it was also meaningful. We heard from Josh Hawley on this front too. Mm-hmm. There is a very small, at this point, but vocal element of the MAGA MAGA caucus within the Republican conference. It's like, well, we say that we're the populist party for working class Americans. Shouldn't we be making sure that poor and working class Americans are getting their benefits, or making sure they can put food on their table? There's a heck of a lot of Donald Trump voters that receive SNAP benefits. So on the one hand, I think it shows kind of the weakness of their position, but I don't think that necessarily means that Mike Johnson is weak, because it's such a small number at this point of Republicans who have felt like they need to speak out about this.
Well, J.D. Vance was taking some heat today when he met with Senate Republicans to tell NBC News that he took a lot of heat about Trump's proposal to import beef from Argentina and how that would hurt U.S. ranchers. Leanne, what are you hearing? I mean, it was written that at one point J.D. Vance said, does anybody have any questions that aren't about beef?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that J.D. Vance came to the Capitol to talk to House Republicans, and the government shutdown barely came up. So it's also really telling what the administration's focus is and what Senate Republicans' focus is too. But you're absolutely right. I was on the Hill today talking to Senate Republicans, and they absolutely said that beef was the number one issue that was brought up in that lunch, that Vice President Vance was told that the president should reconsider his decision to import beef from Argentina. This is really impacting a lot of red states, a lot of cattle producing states, which are red states: South Dakota, Montana, North Dakota, the list, Nebraska, the list goes on. But yeah, it's interesting that this is the one thing that a mass of Republicans are breaking with the administration on. There is a long list of things that privately some have been disgruntled about or don't approve of, but this is the one that they are very public about. Their cattle ranchers are upset. They're hearing from their constituents. And I was told that the vice president was going to go back to the president and see what the plan forward is.
Those ranchers, those farmers, those are not low information voters. They deeply understand how trade works and how it impacts them. J.D. Vance also said today that the government will pay troops this week despite the shutdown. Jeff, where is that money coming from, and how is the White House picking and choosing what to fund? Because Mike Johnson said they don't have the ability to fund SNAP. How come they have the ability to pay the military? And by the way, I'm glad they are.
Sure. Pardon me. I think that's the operative question, is how are they going to do it? And he didn't make that clear. The White House hasn't made that clear, other than to say, they have some options of moving money around. But the big question, I think, is the one that you're asking. How do they do that? And what else is around that they can potentially use? And what other priorities do they have? But your question about why the troops, I think the answer to that is certainly that it's a political priority for this White House to pay troops. The president, part of his campaign last year, and the last couple times that he ran for president was about veterans, and he certainly likes to portray himself as a supporter of the troops. And certainly, if you can't pay the troops, it's pretty hard to make that argument. But so I think that's why they've made that a priority. But the details of how that's going to happen and how it can continue if this shutdown continues, which right now, there's no sign that it's going to end, is another, I would say, big question.
Tim, I'm thinking about things that Republicans care about. Many wanted the Epstein files released. We hear nothing about it. They're not happy. The government is shut down. Their health care costs are about to go up, and life is expensive. Yet the White House, yet the House now has that. I can't even get a word out. Despite the fact that they haven't been to work in weeks, they're now focused on investigating Joe Biden's auto pen. How does this come across to voters?
I mean,
clearly I'm tongue-tied. I can't even get my head around it.
Yeah, I guess they need to pretend like they have something to do. I don't know, we're going to investigate the auto, but it's obviously crazy on its face. And it's worth noting that one of the reasons that the House is now back in session, besides the fact that they want, that they don't want to negotiate on SNAP or on Obamacare subsidies, is the fact that if Mike Johnson has to seat the Democrat from Arizona that won the special election, then there would be enough votes in the House to actually release the Epstein files. So the Epstein files cover-up is part of, why they don't have the House in session, and obviously this stupid auto pen investigation is just a distraction from that. One other thing, if you'll indulge me, I like when I get a chance to put on my former Republican free market hat about J.D. Vance's fight on the Hill. It is pretty crazy that these guys are so responsive to the ranchers' protectionist concerns about their beef, and that's the one thing that Republican senators are complaining about. I mean, I don't know. And there are a lot of Republican voters who eat beef who would like to have lower prices and who don't have a special interest. I guess hamburger eaters don't have a lobby in Washington, but there are a lot more of them than there are ranchers. And I would think that maybe this administration should just stop the stupid trade wars, and the Republicans in Congress who used to believe in free markets should take back control of the purse, and we could open the markets back up, and the farmers could sell their soybeans, and we could buy beef, and that's kind of how things work.
Free markets have left the building, right? There's no sign of free markets. I mean, every single day, a different company, a different CEO walks into the White House and negotiates with Howard Lutnick to get some sort of exemption or deal to get themselves out from under the boot from tariffs. So we're nowhere near free markets, which is something that Republicans stood by for years and years, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. For sure. And again, this is their job. They have the power of the purse constitutionally, and they could take this job back. John Thune was a longtime free trader before he became the majority leader of the Senate. They could do this at any time if they wanted to actually pick a fight with the president and help farmers and help consumers. But they're choosing not to do it. And so, their crocodile tears in a private meeting with J.D. Vance isn't really that moving to me.
If you cry privately and you have a public job, it doesn't mean anything. Jeff, let's talk about the Trump administration today carrying out more deadly boat strikes in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the U.S. is building up its military presence near Venezuela. Your colleagues at Reuters report that military officials involved with the operation in Latin America are being forced to sign NDAs. What does this mean? How unusual is it?
To my colleague Phil Stewart, who does amazing work covering the Pentagon and is among the Pentagon press corps that has left the building in protest at the request to sign a rules or an agreement that was such an offense to freedom of the press. That aside, to your question, Steph, it is very unusual, as Phil writes in that story. It is also a sign, I would argue, that the administration is concerned about details coming out about these moves. And it's also, and another reason that it's unusual is that members of the military, certainly military leaders, are already required to protect information like that and classified information from getting out to the public. So it's very Trumpian. I mean, the president, before he became a politician, certainly made use of NDAs. And the fact that that is now a part of his administration's work at the Pentagon and in a place where classified information is, already has guardrails is quite unusual.
Tonight's discussion lays bare a troubling portrait of American governance. a nation where millions now stand at the edge of hunger, caught in the crossfire of political paralysis. Over 42 million Americans rely on SNAP to put food on the table. That's not a statistic, that's real people, parents, children, veterans, who now face empty shelves while Washington debates procedure, priorities, and power. The second Trump administration's decision not to release emergency funds for food assistance has triggered a legal and moral storm across the country. Dozens of states are now suing the federal government, not out of politics, but out of necessity. Because when the government shuts down and refuses to feed its people, the crisis is no longer fiscal, it's human. And yet, while Americans wonder how to buy groceries, Congress remains out of session. Lawmakers collect paychecks while millions face uncertainty. The focus instead has shifted to investigations about the president's auto pen and trade spats over imported beef. It's a surreal contrast, one that perfectly captures the growing disconnect between political theatre in Washington and the real world suffering outside it. The question we're left asking is simple. When did governing turn into performance art? When did our elected officials stop serving and start staging? Speaker Mike Johnson, once lifted to power with Donald Trump's blessing, now faces resistance not only from Democrats, but from within his own party. Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are openly defying him, not out of unity for the people, but out of frustration for lost influence. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans are divided between ideology and survival. Some worrying about trade, others about optics. The core issue, feeding Americans, has somehow fallen to the bottom of the agenda. And amid this chaos, the White House's silence is just as deafening. As Jeff Mason noted, there's been little visible empathy, no major statement about hunger, and no direct reassurance for the millions whose benefits are vanishing. Politics, once again, has overshadowed compassion. This shutdown, now stretching past 280 days into the second Trump term, reveals something larger than partisan failure. It exposes a moral one, because government isn't a game of leverage. It's a promise to its people. When that promise breaks, faith in democracy erodes one unpaid grocery bill, one missed meal at a time. But maybe the deeper question is for us, the citizens. How long will we accept leadership that rewards loyalty over logic, sound bites over substance, and spectacle over service? At what point do we, as voters, demand more than outrage and rhetoric? Demand results? Because the truth is, hunger doesn't care about ideology. It doesn't check party lines. It doesn't wait for politics to resolve itself. It's urgent, immediate, and deeply human. So as the shutdown drags on and political leaders search for someone to blame, the American people are left to feed each other through food banks, charities, and quiet acts of compassion. Perhaps that's where true leadership still lives. Not in the marble halls of Washington, but in the hearts of ordinary citizens who still believe in responsibility, empathy, and community. Maybe it's time our government learned from them. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, fact-based news commentary.